Okay, it must be Thursday. Because it's Aloha United We Stand. And Aloha United refers to Aloha United Way. They help us keep things together around here when it talks about the social safety net and education of the public. And we learned tonight about prevention of things we want to prevent in the community. And next to me is Cindy Adams, and she is the CEO of Aloha United Way, the progenitor of this show, this series, may I say. Welcome to the show.
You're going to have to use easier words, Jay. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It started about, what, 6 months ago, I think?
Yes. The program?
Yeah.
Yes. It was a fabulous idea, and it was just a really tremendous way to bring visibility to a number of the partner agencies that we work with and the really great work that they do.
Yeah. And you and I kicked it off in a show just like this.
We did.
And we spoke about, the unsung heroes of the nonprofit community and how you knew them, but nobody else did.
That's right.
In large part. And so now you've given us, gee whiz, dozens of them. And they have been great. I've enjoyed meeting everyone. They are great human beings. They've sort of integrated their lives with the common good. Mahayana, you know Mahayana?
No.
It means the common good.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're after around here.
Yes.
So when we hit, a series like this, it's perfect. It's Mahayana.
Okay.
Everybody working on the same page to improve the community. Wow.
Well, it's a tremendous opportunity, and I know that, we're always looking for ways to talk about the investment that donors are making in our community and the programs that we're supporting and the outcomes of those programs. So we really appreciate the opportunity.
Let's take a moment and talk about Aloha United Way. What is it? What's the depth and breadth and activities?
So Aloha United Way, I think people tend to think of us as a fundraiser, right? We're kind of a consolidator of community funding. And over the years, I think we started in a fairly pure fundraising mode. But over the years, as we think about how do we remain relevant or how do we continue to be relevant to our community, what are the things that we can do to really help address some of the bigger social issues in our communities, we've had to change kind of the way that we operate. What we do, and therefore how the community views us. And so since the beginning of this show, right, about 6 months ago, we've been talking about community impact. And the first section was kind of about, or the first group of partner agencies was about education. And if you think about a person's life, education, and even, kind of 0 through 5 before they get into kindergarten, is a very significant point in a child's life to have certain kinds of impacts that dramatically affect the trajectory of their life for the remainder. And so that's where we start. The next group of partner agencies that will be speaking will be focused on what we call poverty prevention. And so today we'll spend a little bit of time talking about what that means. But those are kinds of, and then the third one will be safety net or crisis. Helping individuals who are in some sort of a crisis point in their life. So we really have decided that those are the 3 impact areas that we think we would like, that we are focusing on in terms of reinvesting donations in the community. There are important programs in each of those areas that we focus on, very specific social issues and metrics that we're trying to achieve. And so that's much broader than just being a fundraiser in the community. Sure.
Well, I so enjoyed the education part of the series because I met such nice people doing things that, I think all of the 3 parts of the series relate to this. And that is, giving better prospects for a better life.
Absolutely.
And those kids, those young kids, if you don't take certain steps with them, you can be fairly sure they're going to have a hard life.
That's right. There were certain key things that you can either help to facilitate, or if they don't happen, there's a direct correlation to the quality of that person's life as they progress.
Yeah, and it isn't necessarily a social thing or necessarily with their family. It could be personal. It could be their personal health, their personal state of mind. You know what they say, you're a young kid, you're very impressionable.
Yes.
And those tracks in your mind are set up
Right.
really early. And if they set in the wrong direction, you can't recover.
Right.
And that's why chapter 1 was really important. Is chapter 2 as important, do you think?
I think chapter 2 is, yes. So the answer is, yes, it is as important. And the kind of the impetus behind chapter 2 is really, when we talk about poverty prevention, so when I look at all of the social services that we provide to the community, I think about things that fall into prevention and then things that fall into crisis. If we can prevent crisis from happening, there are so many benefits to that investment, right? And so that's what the first 2 categories are: education, poverty prevention. When we think about those 2 community impact areas in aggregate, we consider those investment in prevention programs to minimize crisis events in families, crisis events with individuals, and certainly the enormous downstream costs associated with those kinds of situations.
It's interesting that all of this, I'm having these thoughts for the first time. All of this really kind of points in the same direction. Namely, if I'm a donor, a contributor
Right.
to Aloha United Way, of course I operate by my heart, because as any human being, I'm touched by, bad stories of people in trouble. I'm touched by that, and I think that's always been the way it has been, and always the way it will be in our human condition. However, as a member of the community, I want my community to be working properly.
Right.
I don't want to see homeless on the street. I don't want to see sick people not being cared for. I don't want to see mental illness or physical illness around me. I don't want to see poverty. I want to see it all working just as swell as we can make it. And I look to you, and you is one part of a larger part of the community that is helping people. I look to you to take the steps necessary to reduce the number of, crises individuals on our streets in our community. Because if there are fewer of them, then my life I'm self-interested at the end of the day. Right. So it would seem to me that all of these 3 chapters you're talking about all go to that somehow. Maybe not the only purpose, but a significant purpose is to make my life as a contributor better for the preventing, it may be using the word too early, but preventing people in crisis from occupying my community and costing me more.
That's right.
Later.
Right. Kind of an easy example for people to relate to is somebody, so you take a person and think about it in terms of health issues, right? You have a person who, sometimes even as much as you put into prevention, things happen, right? And sometimes you just don't have control over certain kinds of things. But if you think about health, somebody who is healthy and does all kind of the right things, they would have the best, you would think, the best quality of life, right? Those are kind of the assumptions. Live a longer life, be healthier, age in place gracefully, that sort of thing. But even, and I think about this as I think about poverty prevention and crisis, even if somebody is experiencing a health issue, like somebody is homeless, there is still an opportunity as you're addressing that individual in crisis to put other preventive measures in place to either reduce the likelihood that that person would have another episode or that person would continue to remain homeless for an extended period of time. So even though the first 2 chapters are all focused on prevention types of activities and programs, and crisis is more kind of, not, I think of a Band-Aid on a cut, right? You want to prevent the cut from happening, but when you can't prevent that, somebody gets cut, you put a Band-Aid on it, right? So we try to minimize the Band-Aids and try to prevent the cuts.
Yeah.
And same thing with homeless, same thing with poverty.
It's a probabilities game, right? In education, first chapter, you're going to teach them to help themselves.
Right.
And teach them as a family not to make mistakes that are going to get them in trouble. So now you're cutting off X% of the risk.
Right, you're
because
reducing, right?
Reducing the risk.
Right.
Okay, now we're in chapter 2 here in this section, this session of the program. And so we want to prevent things, and those are the things that people could not prevent themselves by virtue of their education, which we improved. It's new things, additional things, and we're using that again to reduce the probability of a problem.
Right.
And then if we
Right.
can't reduce it by step 1 or step 2, and it still happens, then we go to
Then we have
crisis
safety net.
management.
Right,
And
right.
the third thing.
Yes,
And the idea is to keep crisis management as small as possible.
that's correct.
Fewer crises.
Right,
you know,
right.
yeah.
And it, one would hope that that means that you have an overall healthier community, right? I would say that education and poverty prevention are not mutually exclusive, meaning that I view it as a continuum, right? So if you have a child who is doing very well in school, that doesn't necessarily mean that that child knows how to manage money, or that child has financial assets that will help get him or her through life, right? So even if we see a child go through school and graduate and go to college, there are still opportunities to kind of shore up their life that I would consider poverty prevention. Teen pregnancy education, right? Financial literacy. There are lots of different kinds of things that can help to shore up even the first effort to prevent the crisis scenario.
We talked before the show about the change in our community, and maybe that's the larger national or even international community. But how do you see, the community in terms of these three things, these three series? I mean, is the community today at greater risk for these kinds of things, teenage pregnancy and health issues, and lack of education, ability to handle money, poverty? Are we at greater risk now? Is your burden greater, say, today than it would have been 20, 30 years ago?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say certain things are certainly worse, have gotten worse, over particularly, not particularly, we've seen a trend, like in the homeless, the number of homeless
Definitely
people,
a trend,
right?
yeah.
Definitely a trend, at least over the last 7 years, where that number has continued to grow instead of plateauing or dropping. So that we know we need to do things differently to help address that segment of the population. Some of that is driven by economics. Some of it is driven by just being in Hawaii, right? The lack of affordable housing, and what is affordable to you or to me is not affordable to somebody else. The cost of food here, even as we grow our own food, right? Because the cost of land and water management, those are all critical issues for us. The cost of food is more expensive, even if, potentially even if we're growing it in Hawaii. So there are a lot, living wages.
It's not in a
It's
vacuum.
very, everything is connected. Everything is connected, and it's very complex.
Well, you know what's funny that you should say this, because this week I've been focusing on one thought. We can see if you agree with it. One of the problems in government is the government gets distracted. And it has to get distracted because it has to come up with fresh material to titillate the voters. so it gets distracted. And so you can make a resolution that you're going to deal with, for example, homelessness, and get very excited about that. 2 weeks later, there's something else that happens. So that homelessness is passé, and we go on and on. And the trick of good government is to have a good memory. And remember that yes, we did agree that we were going to deal with homelessness. We shouldn't forget that. Bad to forget. Okay, and so there are certain things that you should not be distracted from. And it's called my theory of non-distraction.
Okay.
Okay, and they are the principal things. Number one is, how are the people doing? I mean, how is the sociology doing? Especially in Hawaii, which is, on the one hand, a great polyglot, a great merger, a coming together On the other hand, it's, you know, it's complex, and it's fragile in its own way. Two is, we have to have affordable housing, we have to have reasonable jobs, and we have to have reasonable prices in this community. And if we don't have that, we're going to have a problem. And I suppose you could add a bunch of other things on, infrastructure and getting around. That's really important.
Public transportation.
But when we don't solve those things, when we get distracted, when we have amnesia about what we decided to do, it winds up on your doorstep, doesn't it?
Right. And, you know, and we know that the government, it's kind of two things, right? We know that the government doesn't have enough money, because this is all sitting on the tax base, right? Doesn't have enough money to address all of the issues that any community is experiencing. This is not specific to Hawaii. This is across the world. So that's one thing. And then there are these, as you said, the things you don't want government to become distracted from, that kind of lays the table for the social issues. And you know, to some extent, government potentially changes every 4 years, right? Because of the election cycles. And so there's this, oftentimes this lack of continuity in terms of remaining focused on some of the bigger social issues. And when something's very small, relatively speaking, that's okay, because it can be a relatively kind of an isolated impact approach to addressing an issue. Once an issue gets past a tipping point, and I would say homeless is one of those issues for our community, then you have to have significant collaboration, significant coordination in order for the issue to be addressed in a big and sustainable and a scalable way. And I think the lack of continuity and, relatively speaking, the short-term perspective of government, which there are lots of reasons why that happens, make it very difficult for us to resolve big issues in our community.
But there are some issues that are easy to resolve. For example, we're 15 minutes into the show. We know we have to take a break. It's easy what we have to do.
That's right.
There are no choices here.
Small. Yes.
We're going to take a break now. That's Cindy Adams. She's the CEO of Aloha United Way. Here we are in Aloha United We Stand, and we're talking about Chapter 2 is prevention. We get to that right after this break.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia, and by Asia we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there. But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidell and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our show on healthcare in Hawaii to talk with leaders from across all the spectrum of health in our state, or you can join us for any other show where we talk about economic development or tourism or some really eclectic programs too. So really, we'd love to see you here on our show. Thanks for joining us and thanks for supporting us.
Hi there. This is Jay Fidell here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We have Cindy Adams. She's the CEO of Aloha United Way. We are honored to have her here and her people over a long series, which we like very much, about Aloha United We Stand. And today's discussion is Chapter 2 is prevention, because Chapter 1 was education. Okay, but we're going to take a moment off here. We're going to answer a question by a tweet person, Mark Ward, who wrote just a few minutes ago. ThinkTech, in your experience, what do you find is the greatest obstacle to managing crisis? That is, aside from money, I'm not sure you can separate them. And what are we not doing well? Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your questions. We always enjoy getting questions on Twitter. What do you think, Cindy?
So, you know, when I think about crisis, I think about so preventing is great, right? So you do what you think you can do to minimize the opportunity for crisis to arrive. So money aside, assuming you had all the money in the world, although that does make a big difference, I think it's anticipating, having a plan to address the crisis, right? And then it's making sure everybody knows what their role is, that everybody is accountable, and that everybody is operating off of the same plan so that you can get to the same objective, whatever that crisis is. So to me, that's kind of a very basic kind of fundamentals to how do you address crisis.
Yeah, what do we need and,
Yes.
and what are we not doing as well as we could?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so I think, for us, when I think about the homeless problem as an example, right? This has been going on for many, many years in Honolulu, across the state. But we certainly have a huge segment of the homeless population on Oahu specifically. And I think it's coming together to address the problem, identifying roles, making sure everybody's accountable for their execution of that part of the plan, and not everybody working toward the same goal. And it sounds like a very simple thing, but the bigger the problem, the bigger the crisis, the more difficult it is to make exactly that happen.
That's a big problem. Let me throw a thought at you.
Mm-hmm.
Homelessness at this level, I mean, a few people homeless, we've always had that.
Right.
Sometimes more than a few. But now we have a substantial percentage of people.
Thousands.
Homeless, and thousands, and increasing. And no easy solution, for sure. And it's a canary in the coal mine. What it says to me is that we as the community haven't figured out how to deal with them, and they have decided to drop out. And they're not necessarily going to cooperate with us in solving that problem. They've decided it's just too tough to live in the community, in the rules, in the space we collectively have created. So they're out of here. They're going to do it. And in the community there's a place for them. We made it kind of a place. Homelessness, that's the place. And to bring them back is hard because they find that place a better place for them than the ordinary working stiff kind of place. Because we have, maybe the solution to homelessness is to make the community a better place at the core of it. Then everybody will flock to the core.
Right.
But right now, a lot of people, they make a decision in their lives, they don't want to be there.
So I disagree with you a little bit, which is I don't think that the majority, in fact, I think it's a minority of the homeless population who choose to be there because they don't want to abide by the rules of society. I think that's a very small percentage of the homeless population. I think there are so many other factors that cause people to become homeless. Some of it is by choice. Some of it is something that they didn't have control over. Maybe a health problem and therefore not being able to hold down a job. Could be that you got laid off from work and it's taking you a long time to find another job. And so there are, if you think about those different scenarios, there are different things that we could have in place as a community to kind of help people, I call those during those gaps, so that they don't become somebody who's homeless for a very extended period of time. Because as you can imagine, or generations, because as you can imagine, the longer you're homeless, just like the longer you're abusing drugs, the longer you're not healthy, it takes a significantly higher investment to pull somebody back from that condition. And so when we think about prevention in the continuum of homelessness, right, the things that we can do to prevent people from becoming homeless are the things that we should identify and consider investing in. And even, if you think about at this point, you're not homeless, but you're very close to becoming homeless, and then past that point, you are homeless, there are even things we can do as families and individuals are standing right on that edge to pull them back and keep them from becoming homeless. And so there are things like utility subsidies, there are things like rent subsidies, there are things like food pantries, things like that, that pull people away from that edge and prevent them from going over that edge. So again, I think the number of people who choose to be homeless because they don't want to live in the rules of society, very, very small number.
Yeah, I
relatively
certainly
speaking.
wouldn't want to go
Yeah.
on record and take that position. I think, however, that there are a lot of people who need to cooperate with those who are trying to help them.
Sure, yes.
And if they don't
yes.
cooperate, they're not going to make any progress.
That's right, that's
So
right.
it's
This is a
two-
voluntary process, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
two-way.
Yes, absolutely. I
So,
agree.
but here we are in the prevention department. We're doing prevention. We've done education, and maybe with the change in circumstances in our times, it hasn't worked in a given family or person. So now we want to do prevention. We want to bring them back from the edge.
Right,
I take it that in that chair in the next few months, I'm going to see people who come
That are doing
around,
things like
who
that.
you are supporting through
Yes.
contributions.
absolutely.
Who are involved in that very act of prevention. What are they, who are they, what are they like, what's the focus of their efforts?
So some of them include Goodwill, the YWCA, Catholic Charities, Child and Family Services, and there are also smaller organizations. And I'm not going to steal their thunder. They will talk about all of their programs, but they're programs that can help to address people in various stages of their life. People who are struggling with different kinds of issues, and figuring out how to help them and keep them housed and keep them stable, and some of that includes kind of workforce redevelopment, right? So job training. How do you take someone who's never done something like this and get them to a point where they can be productive and earn a living and be able to keep themselves housed and fed and healthy?
You know, there must be a fine line, Cindy, between what this part of the nonprofit community does and what government does or would like to do. Because there's a lot of money involved. I mean, a lot of need, monetary need, to
Right.
keep people away from poverty and so forth. To keep them, as you said, pull them back from the cliff. Where is that line? I mean, is it a matter of identifying a preventative, area of activity and moving into that area? Is it a matter of telling the government that they should do it? Is it a matter of both being involved at that fine line? Where's the line?
In my mind, the line is not so clear. And, so I would say a couple of things. One is...
You're a terrific guest, no kidding. I remember our earlier conversation was also the same thing. Yes, there were two hands clapping here.
People like to address crisis, I think. I think people feel good when they can do that. I think it's probably an accurate statement to say the vast majority of the nonprofit community is addressing crisis, not focusing on prevention. And to be honest, I think the tide is changing, but a large number of foundations and donors also like to address crisis. So I think there needs to be a cultural shift in terms of, where is the best place for us collectively to invest? You can't stop investing in crisis, but is there a reasonable shift we can make in prevention so that we kind of stop the bleeding, right? Because if you don't focus on prevention, this is kind of a very graphic image. You're upstream and there's a troll throwing babies in the water, and the villagers are downstream spending all their time pulling the babies out of the water so they don't drown. you need somebody to focus on the troll that's throwing the babies in the water to stop all the activity that's down here,
It's a lot
right?
easier.
It's kind of that mentality. How do we, to a greater extent, shift where the investment is being made in the community? And it's not an easy thing to shift because donations come from somebody's heart, right? And people want to put that money where it makes them feel good. And there are lots of valid reasons why people do that. But I think Aloha United Way is in a good place to focus on prevention. And so if we look at all of the donations that come into Aloha United Way through workplace campaigns and through private donors and grants, our split today is probably, in terms of community impact funding, is 60% prevention, 40% safety net.
That's as it should be, I think. At least prevention should be more
Should
money
be a
in
larger,
prevention.
right.
Because then you minimize the crisis.
Right, but I think that we have the flexibility to do that we have the ability to do that. Many service providers can't make that adjustment because their mission is to address the crisis, right? So they should continue to do that because somebody does need to be focused on that. Yeah. But we're trying to kind of focus on the upstream issues.
We got to take a break, but before we do, I just want to give you a thought that occurs to me, is that it's a wavy line, a vague line, if you will, between what the nonprofit community does or can do and the government can do. And government, we talked about changes before the show. Government has certainly changed, both at the local and national levels. And, I think when we went to school, you and me, although I'm sure I went before you did, we had a different feeling about government, especially federal government. They could do no wrong for a long time. But I don't think people feel that way anymore. And they could do wrong, and maybe sometimes they're too big and clumsy oath government kind of thing. Where at the same time, private nonprofit organizations such as Aloha United Way and also the organizations that you deal with and support, those organizations are more nimble, and your contributors are more they're more devoted to exactly what you are doing. They have a better knowledge of what you're doing, and they vote for you with their contributions.
Right.
And so it seems to me that the line, if I were to look at a sea change here, the line is probably moving.
It's shifting.
Yes. In your favor because you're better able to do it. Somebody's got to do it, and you're better able to do it. I'd rather, from my view of the community, I'd rather you do it than the government does it, honestly. Yeah. You don't have to comment on that.
We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to that. Take a break. Whoa. Cindy Adams is the CEO of Aloha United Way, which does such good work and causes other people to do such good work. And today we're talking about Chapter 2 is prevention here on Aloha United We Stand. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Cindy Adams, the CEO of Aloha United Way. And my comment was not the end of it. As I learned during the break, there's more to it. So Cindy, tell us about the shift, if you will, between private and government charitable work.
So I would say, and this is new to me only because I'm kind of new to this position, right, is that we are seeing a shift in the current administration to spending some time and money focused on prevention. And some of that is early childhood education, some things associated with Health and Human Services. And as we were talking about during the break, so the good news is that we are seeing this shift. And the other piece of it that I think is very critical is that it needs to be a partnership. So nonprofit and government need to work together so that we are maximizing not only taxpayer dollars, but donor dollars as we work together to address issues. We can't do it in a vacuum in separate silos. We really need to come together and to collaborate.
You know, one thing that I've noticed, I became aware of it when George Bush, W. Bush, took the oath of office, and he referred to his administration as a time when there would be faith-based initiatives. And forgetting about the Establishment Clause for a minute, he did pursue that. And it seems to me that in those years and coming forward, there's also been a shift in the role of faith-based organizations in charitable giving and in helping those less fortunate in our community. Do you see that here in Hawaii, and how does it play out?
So what kind of a shift do you think you're seeing?
I would say, well, it's a guess, but I would say, I'm really interested in your answer. I would guess that the churches are more active in providing funding, not necessarily actual services, but funding in any event for organizations which help the downtrodden. Am I right? Or are they doing it directly, or are they not doing it?
So from my perspective, I haven't seen that in terms of dollars coming in, and that's not to say that that is not happening. I would say we have seen on this topic of partnership, we have certainly seen, and I think this has always existed, but I think it's finding kind of where are you optimized in terms of your role in helping to address a problem, right? That includes the nonprofits, that includes the government, that includes business, and that includes the faith-based community. So, I grew up in church. We did a lot of volunteer work as teenagers. So we did that, our family did that all our lives. And so I don't think, in my estimation, it's not maybe any more. Maybe it's the partnerships are a little bit differently in terms of how we all work together toward the same common goal. But I think the faith-based community has been involved to a large extent in their communities forever, in my mind. The interesting thing in terms of all of those partnerships is the business community, I think. And I think that the business community, although like faith-based communities, have participated in ways for many, many years and generations. I think there is a heightened sense of awareness in the business community, and this is not just in Hawaii, I think it's around the nation, that they have to participate to help solve the bigger community issues. And a really good example is Waikiki and the homeless problem, right?
Sure.
Where they have decided, good, bad, or indifferent, they can't wait for government to fix that. Government has a whole bunch of other issues that they're looking at as well.
And it affects their business.
It has a direct, anytime there is a direct correlation or impact to something that you care about, that's the impetus to create action, right? And that's exactly what it did in Waikiki. And that's a really good example of the business community coming together to work with nonprofit to help address an issue.
What are they doing specifically? I mean, can we learn from how they have handled the homeless issue in Waikiki? Can we learn and use those lessons on a larger scale? So
I think there are a couple of things. One is that a business community can come together. I think of them as an affinity group. This is around the visitor industry, right? They can come together and decide that they want to take an action and move the needle on a big social issue that is affecting their business.
That's very important.
It's really, really important. And when visitors are telling a hotel general manager that they are afraid of the homeless population, because they feel like they're aggressive or they're being accosted or they're, those kinds of things, it hits your pocket, right? And so it becomes a very significant issue that needs to be addressed. So that's one lesson learned, that the business community can come together on an issue like this and help support it and drive it through fundraising. On the other side, I think we're learning a lot through what IHS is doing. So Connie Mitchell, right, and her team and others who are involved in that community are learning things that I think become leverageable for the larger homeless population. So it's kind of like a pilot, a real scenario.
A pilot of possible initiatives that could actually help us do this.
Absolutely.
It also occurs to me, just talking to you, and I had the same impression last time we were together here, is that as the CEO of Aloha United Fund, you care about this whole area of activity, the whole area of, call it prevention. And it's not just your contributors and your clientele organizations, but you're talking about social policy for the whole state, for the entire community, way outside actually of just your part of it. Am I right?
Yes, that's true. I mean, we can't do it by ourselves. We have to as a community. That's everybody, all the stakeholders, right? We have to agree. We have to make that investment. And it can't be in a silo, it can't be in isolation, because as I said, everything here is connected, whether we think about it that way or not.
So what also emerges out of this conversation is that if you had to look for the most iconic expression of the troubles in our community, you would find it easily in homelessness. That's where it all shows up.
And that is a symptom, right? That is a symptom
yes,
of some root cause issues we have in our state that are all around everything. I mean, it's the cost of living. It's so many things.
Everything.
It's so many things.
And where do you start?
Right.
Where do you attack the problem?
Right.
So I guess my question is prevention. Preventing homelessness would seem to me to be a very worthy activity. But how much do we know about how that works? And can we do that? Are you going to be sending people who are actually preventing homelessness?
So the guests for the next few weeks will be talking about specific programs that they are managing that help to either keep people away from the edge or shorten the period of time that somebody is homeless, or actually prevent somebody from even getting close to the edge. So yes, those are the kinds of conversations you can expect to be having over the next several weeks. And I think it will be, the great thing about this is we all have an opportunity to learn. And I think there's some great work that's going on that would be helpful for people to understand, so that they can think about this homeless issue that we have in a different context, right? It's a much more diverse conversation that we can have.
Yeah, this really helps me prepare, for dealing with the guests that you send me, because I can try to make some sort of find some universal points that apply across the board, maybe learn something from them about where it's going and what we can do about it, and how we can be efficient in preserving our quality of life.
Right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Always wonderful to have
Thank
you
you,
here.
Jay.
Next time soon.
Yeah.